Hey everyone, it's Michael Zapersky and welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Damon Holowchac. Damon, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Yeah, we're talking about kids and sizzling and all kinds of energy or lack thereof at times.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. And large coffees and espresso.
Yeah, large coffees, those can certainly help. So listen, I'm excited, Damon, to dive in. Your company is called Super Collider, which you're the CEO of, and it's an independent creative studio based in Vancouver, BC, and Portland, Oregon. Your clients include very well-known organizations like Lululemon, New Balance, Air Jordan, PepsiCo, many more. And you've done a lot of work in the hospitality industry, where you helped Donnelly Group grow into what I believe from the research that the team did here into one of the largest independent hospitality groups in all of Canada, which is pretty cool. So big welcome. Glad to have you here and excited to dive in.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And yeah, you're right. You nailed it. Everything on that was true.
Okay, good. So the research team, yes. Well done. Thank you, team. All right. So let's get into it. I really want to explore how the community and our listeners and viewers can turn their consulting kind of brands and businesses into ones that their clients love and talk about and trust. But before we do that, let's go back in time a little bit. You served as, I believe, the director of brand and marketing for the Donnelly Group. How did you specifically, like, what were some of the steps that you took, or what were some of the best practices that were used to grow this hospitality group into the largest in Canada?
Yeah, great question. I guess we just got to go back in the Wayback Machine. Yeah. And talk a bit about like how I, ended up there. It's interesting to talk about Donnelly Group as the largest independent hospitality group, and I think it's in North America, or for a time it was.
Amazing.
And there's just so many big words. It sounds so like grandiose and awesome because truly, what I feel about it was it's literally just a bunch of us that all knew each other, that were good buds, good friends. That's how it felt as it grew. Donnelly Group, a lot of people don't know, which is strange, which maybe I did a poor job branding it, was Donnelly Group's just one person, Jeff Donnelly. He's one gentleman and a partner, which is his best friend since like high school. They grew up in like North Delta. And they basically started together with Biminis public house, right? That everybody has a story.
Because most of our listeners will not be familiar with the Vancouver area or BC, or maybe not even Canada. We have a lot of international listeners. It's been interesting that I've had a streak recently of a few people that have come on that are more local, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you should also talk to this person. This person might be good. And so I'm having more people that are local, but everything that you share, imagine that they have no idea what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I will say that this individual started probably in the early 2000s, the hottest spot in the greater Vancouver area. And for a time, I said to Michael, everybody over 30 in the lower mainland of the major Vancouver metropolitan area has a story about Biminis at some point. And from that success, he began to expand, and then slowly but surely grinded out a few. And then I came on in 2010, 2011, the end of 2010, because it was just post-Olympics that happened here in Vancouver, which was an absolute, for the hospitality industry anyway, it was an absolute like gangbusters. It didn't matter. You could be flipping flapjacks out of a red wagon on the side of the road, and you made a ton of money and you had fantastic success up until there. So basically Jeff had built the foundation of this hospitality empire leading up to the Olympics. Had about 5-6 properties at that point, all like partnered in with people. And then boom, Olympics hit, tons of notoriety, tons of exposure. Everybody goes out. And that's when I came on and had to look at, taking it from the vacuum, the post-Olympic sort of decompression that happened. It was slow, right? People were excited for a very long time. It sort of changed how people went out and viewed Vancouver as a fun spot. It was no fun city for so long. Those Olympics were pretty fun, and people in Vancouver and the world definitely jumped on that reputation for a while. So I came on. My expertise has always been in the hospitality, promotions, marketing business. Came in basically to help their sports marketing side of things. sports guy and have a lot of experience in the sports marketing world, and said, take you on as a contract. And then that snowballed into eventually being a partner in the business and, a director at a director level. But for
Can
me,
you explain what is like sports marketing in the context of hospitality? What does that look like? What were you actually doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. A big part of, especially people in the US will definitely relate to this, is sports are just integrated into pub culture in North America, right? A lot more. Like the concept of Donnelly Group, what Jeff originally had, were these early 2000s London style pubs, which, by the way, back then weren't just like jolly old pubs that were 500 years old serving, just the slimy grog or whatever. They actually were like, in London, especially early 2000s, they were popping, right? They were like clubs at night, and they had good, better than, bangers and mash food. Tons of, like, it was a very boozy, a lot more boozy than you'd think of. And that was the concept that Jeff kind of brought over here, and it took off and went running. But a big part of our North American culture is like going to the bar and watching a football game, Monday Night Football. We have a hockey culture here in Vancouver, right? Hockey are the top 3 sports in all of Vancouver. It's integrated into the DNA of any place where you're having like social beers. So I came in to kind of bolster and help build part of the business, which there's a lot of competition for, right? Everybody's showing the game. Everybody's putting their effort into, making it a fantastic experience.
Yeah.
By the way, we can talk a lot about how different that is today than it was in 2010, 2011.
Well, I think, Damien, what I'm really interested in is like from the perspective of a consultant. Here you're dealing with what might appear to be a commodity. So in the sense that, you have a physical location that serves alcohol and serves food and non-alcoholic drinks as well. But you have a television or multiple televisions, and you have cable access and whatever sport is playing at that time.
Yep.
What can you do, or what did you do at Donnelly Group to differentiate, to say, hey, we're providing something that is different or better to get people to actually come to your location as opposed to another? Like, was there something that could be done to create that differentiation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question too, because especially when my philosophy going into every meeting with my team was always like, everything's been done and everybody's doing everything, right? Like, what ideas do you have? But just know that it's probably being beaten to death by somebody somewhere. So it was definitely a challenge, right? And so that's kind of led to the brand part of things, right? Because it wasn't just like, hey, here's just like a functional, like, cheap beer, right? Because if in hospitality, for people know, many industries for that matter, if you decided to be just the cheapest, someone's going to chase that cheapest price down the road, right? They're going to chase it to wherever they go. They don't really like you; they like the price of your beer, right? So that was an issue. Same with food. Same with just like giving stuff away, right? Like, you just want to give tickets or this or that, cool perks. But if people are chasing the freebies, do they like you, or do they like the fact that they might get a free jersey from you? So we built it upon experience. So there's a few fundamentals that I just put in place like immediately. It was just like, we will be experts at sports. Okay. We'll be experts at showing the game. So what does that mean? Let's dissect that on a functional, operational level. One of the big fundamentals of that was, as a brand, we will have the best stuff or the right stuff on all the TVs all the time. Okay. And so it came from a place of, and it was this is how I explained it to people, was that, me as a sports guy, if I roll into a place that touts that they show games and they're good at sports and they do whatever, and I sit down on a Tuesday afternoon, and I know that, the Duke North Carolina game is on the East Coast at 5. And even though I might not be there for the game, but as a sports guy, I know that's happening. And I look up at all the TVs that everybody has, and I see that they don't actually even have that on there. I go, you're probably not a very good sports bar, right? If you don't know that game's on. Do you have to have, like, the junior men's, Division III lacrosse game from Alabama going on? Probably not. But I know what's happening in the world of sports. And if you don't have everything dialed in, and there's just like poker, like a lot of stations just turn to like guys playing poker for like 2.5 hours. Like, this isn't good stuff. There's always something on. There's always so this was a big tenet that we brought in there and said, hey, you got to know what's on everywhere. Now, if I see that you have the Duke game on, I'm not going to like call all my friends and be like, we got to come down. The Ducade's on. I just know you know what you're talking about. I just
Mhm.
know that you care and you put energy and effort into understanding what's out there, and you're just going to put it on because it's better than the person down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's so many people listening right now and joining us will be like, this, why are you talking about sports? This has nothing to do with consulting. But my brain is processing this, and I'm thinking about how there's so many similarities. Every consultant out there, to a degree, is playing in some zone or some kind of area of commoditization where there's another consultant that also provides what you do, and they say very similar things. So how do you differentiate? Well, if you go a level deeper, if you explain things further, if you provide more details, if you provide more value as a way to demonstrate your expertise, and it could come through your articles, your videos, your podcasts, your speaking, whatever, but you're doing something to put it out there to show that you understand your ideal client. So in this case, your ideal client was, the beer drinking sports fan. And for a consultant in the AI, fintech space, it's a bank or whoever it might be. But if you can demonstrate that you understand your ideal client better than your competition, that provides an advantage. Correct?
That's a fantastic way to put it. And because all of this crap about putting Duke on the TV and having it on at that time and the sound and all of this stuff, these are functional things that were operational deliverables that we expected of the team there. But what they ultimately did was what my expertise in, and that's the brand. That improved the brand. The brand is that shadow that you put out there. You can't always talk to people. Every person that walks down the street say, hey, come to my pub. I will show the Duke game at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday if it's on. I will always have the sound. This is not how we can communicate properly. That's where brand comes in. The brand works that overall, the overarching feel and notion and understanding of our brand was that we're going to do it really, really good, which equals better than everybody else, which makes your decision on where you've decided, you and I, when we get off work to go watch that Duke game or have a long lunch, we're going to go see Damon at Donnelly pub because we know that they just nail it every single time. Specifically, do we know all these things? No, but overall, everyone did it. Everyone did it consistently. Yeah. And over time, people understood that this was something that we were better than everyone for. And it built a very significant revenue stream outside of the regular, soups, salad, beers, and nightclub stuff that we had, because we were very good at it, but we had a clear direction and understanding on where this brand will be positioned. And I think it's important to articulate that those little steps led to us being awesome at it and still known very well for it.
It's so interesting because brand is one of these things that very often people think is like your logo or it's your visual identity. But two things that I've heard over the years that really have resonated with me, connected to a brand, is it's what you do when nobody's watching. And it's also what people say about you when you're not there. And so I think, I don't know if you have any thoughts or experiences connected to those, but those certainly kind of resonate with me.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, and that's the brand is very different than it was like a few years ago, right? Like even just 10 years ago, it wasn't quite as important as it was in the same way. It was important, but important for different reasons. We're dealing in 2022 with people want to know you so much more, right? And in fact, they will find out about you, and you might have a fantastic product, but they want to know who owns the company.
Yeah.
They're gonna go Google the CEO. What are you all about? Are you a cool person? Do I relate to you? Are you doing cool stuff? Are you, and this level, this granular level of understanding of companies now is something that's just been unprecedented. A lot of things contributed to that, especially the last 2 years of pandemic time. We had a lot of time on our hands, and you know what people did? They truly just dug in and became experts at whatever they liked. If I'm going on vacation, I'm digging. I'm going to go dig deep into your fishing charter company to see who you really are. Actually, I'm going to dig deep into 30 of them. And I'm going to find out what reels you're using. And I'm going to find out about those reels and see how much I like those things. So if you can help get yourself further down that pathway with your brand as a whole, you're going to have a way easier time. You can make people more comfortable learning about you. They're not going to get bored or find something or dig deeper. They're going to be like, immediately gravitate to what your values are, and all of this frou-frou brand stuff that we used to always throw around. Now people care about, what if you don't stand for something? A lot of people go like, well, it's cool. It's cool. Keep doing you do. I like these folks over here because they do some different things, or they care.
It's also why it's so important, whether you are a solo independent consultant or you have a team behind you and around you, that you are telling that story, that you are talking about your values and what you care about. Otherwise, people will either just ignore you, or they're going to make up their own mind and try and, create your story for you. But why not tell your story in a way that you want people to remember it, and at least kind of, start the path of that narrative?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an entire industry has been built on what do they say? Control the narrative with PR, right? They use it in like crisis management a lot, but like it's in everything for PR. It's just like control the message yourself and go. And this is the cornerstone, the foundation of good communications planning. But now it's developed into a place where, like, we're in the age of info. They can get it immediately on their phone, on their way, not even in the washroom anymore. It's just like on the way walking to the washroom, they can find out about you and who you are. And if you're not taking control of that, by building a brand that has layers, a brand that really has a true meaning, people see right through it. But by the way, people are experts at understanding that now. They see them all and they dig deep into them to understand them. And so not only the importance of the messaging and brand, but you're getting looked at now by pseudo online brand experts. Because people, that's all they've been doing for 2 years. Like, people are like good at it, and they figure it out real quick.
April of 2019, you started your company, your consulting firm, Super Collider, the agency and so forth. Why did you go out on your own? Why not just keep going now on the back of the success, working with North America's or Canada's largest independent, hospitality group? Why not go to another one? Why'd you go out on your own?
Totally. Good question. So I'd spent a decade there, just about a decade, in hospitality. Mm-hmm. Had a kid, now have a couple kids, right? As a company, we were very scrappy. We're very nimble. You kind of have to be in hospitality. I got to a point just in my personal life where that part of my life, by the way, when I started doing it, if you're in your mid 20s, early 30s, there's a lot of fun. Stuff to be had, right? A lot of Super Bowl parties, but a lot of nightlife, a lot of things. And then, as not that I grew out of it, but it's a bit more challenging. But then also, just like any business you've been to for a while, everybody can relate to this, where you just have your crazy, zany ideas that come out, right? Where you just go like, oh man, one day I'm going to do that. I'm going to make this type of shoe, or whatever it is, right? And you have these, and over a decade, like, I had so much of this stuff, like everybody does. And then at one point I said, well, I just kind of want to do all that stuff, right? I do love brand. I love the digital marketing space. I'm very good at it. I'm comfortable and confident that I could go out and get some business, but I also have all this other crazy stuff that I can. And by being with one company, it kind of limits your ability to do that. And then sorry.
Yeah, no, when you made that decision, Damon, talk me through, what did you do to get your first clients for the company? What were the steps? Did you just reach out to your network? Did you knock on doors? Did you start running ads? What were the steps that you took to get your first few clients in the door?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So the next step, I was about to say too, the other opponent was one of my childhood friends, godfather to my children, Steve Cousins. He was a creative director, designer, superstar guy. He left like when we were super young, and like moved to Massachusetts to go design Burton snowboards when we were like 23. It was like
awesome.
What the hell? Yeah, he's got this amazing resume of really wicked stuff, and a lot of what the Super Collider portfolio is, of all those brands that we work with, come from his massive 20 plus years of experience in the design, creative direction, and visual identity world. In fact, he was the first creative director hired by Chip Wilson. You know that name?
Lululemon, yeah.
Founder of Lululemon, and a little company now. Some people outside of Vancouver will know this brand. It started a brand here called West Beach, snowboard brand. Right. It still exists in some way today, but for those of you who don't know, it was basically your uniform if you were in like the 2000s, and you rode a snowboard or a skateboard, or knew anybody on a skateboard or snowboard, you had a West Beach something. It was very, very like West Coast Canadiana uniform. He was there is where he started, and then just spent 20 years doing all of these amazing, crazy brands. And then he came to a point as well that he was just like, I've done agency life, I've done freelance life. It would be really cool if I did my own thing. So that was the next part of it, to be like, okay, could we combine forces locally to build something that is going to be an agency that we want to work for or be a part of. And so from getting clients, I obviously tapped into my network. So right out the gates, the first bunch, we're all doing some packaging and branding, full brand builds for some alcoholic beverages. We actually even had the opportunity. So this is that zany, your zany, crazy ideas that we all had, was to create our own like gin cocktail in a can and take it from soup to nuts. We brought on a manufacturing partner who took care of all the nasty stuff, like putting it in an actual can or ordering thousands of cans like from overseas. But we built we helped with the product development. We built the brand platform. We built the messaging system. We designed it. We put it on a can. We did go to market. We sent it out to the world. And part and parcel, that was part of our zany idea thing. We'd always want to do something like that. We had a crazy idea to do it. The concept is super weird and awesome and interesting, and took that opportunity to become our own client, so to speak, and send something out to the world. So yeah.
How did that work? What was that experience like? Was it successful? Did it fall on kind of flat on its face, or what came of that zany idea for you?
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, it's not yacht money in that world, unless you're talking Budweiser and Labatt, things like that. So if anybody's just like, hey, I'm off to the races here, we should have a chat. But for that point, it felt really good to go into some liquor stores, beer and wine stores, and lay a beating on the White Claws of the world and the nudes and neutrals. Because it was quite popular and pretty successful through the summer. It's a very summery drink.
Right.
Through the summer, in a lot of places, it actually was gangbusters.
Let me ask you, Damon, what's the hardest part of working with a partner in your experience? What's been most challenging? And on the flip side, I mean, I think most people understand what's most rewarding. Somebody has your back. It's not just you by yourself. You can deal with loneliness. Two is better than one, all that stuff that people know. But more practical, what's been challenging when you have two different people that are coming together to create this in two different locations?
Oh, yeah, being separate. Well, I mean, for starters, we have to put the context of it is as Steve and I have known each other for 20 plus years, right? Went to high school together. So communication is always the most difficult part of any of these things, and we're just able to communicate because we just know each other so well and understand how the person does it. I would say the next step though is for challenges is to just define roles of what you do. When you own something together, everybody's going to wear a lot of hats. Me coming from a hospitality where we grew from something small to something very, very big, those hats go with you along up the ladder. Everybody can relate to that for starting your agency. When it's just like when you first start, you go like, I'm not hiring a CSS guy day one. Okay. Right. So I'm going to have to find my way through there. And it's always defining like, at what point though, am I not the CSS guy anymore? And when does that go here? Right. So because you wear a lot of hats simultaneously together with somebody else, defining what you do is so important. I think it's such a challenge to say like, you obviously have a meaningful contribution to this aspect of the business and this part of it. But just so we don't go crazy and have too many hats, don't play in this end and I won't play in that end. Once you define those guidelines, makes things a lot easier, right? You can focus and get a lot going because everybody knows
that you were able to define that very early on. Or is it just as things move, you're constantly evolving and shifting what your roles and focus should be in the business?
Yeah, I think it's the crux of it is just understanding you need to do that. It never ends, right? It's a continual process of always being clear, because it's especially when you're passionate about something, you want to help this on this side, you want to help on that side. You have, like I said, a meaningful contribution to it. Like it would be better if you did it, but if everybody worked on everything together at the same time, nothing would get done. And it's finding that balance, right? Of where you kind of divide and conquer what you're after. And, as especially as we bring more people on, we all know that the waters get muddied of who talks to who and who has the expertise, right? You can't do it at the same time. I think that's maybe like the second most important thing, communication, and then just understanding who's going to take what and run with it, right? And then you leave your long, drawn out, grinding conversations kind of higher level instead of every piece of minutia. Because entrepreneurs out there, everyone wants to manage every part, right? You have a piece of it. So got to know that.
With your expertise and experience in branding, when you look at whether it's a solo independent consultant or a small consulting firm owner, knowing that they're oftentimes are limited resources and they're already quite busy delivering work for clients, so time is also limited. What would you point them towards as an opportunity to potentially improve on their brand? Like, is there, again, is it just about updating their website with better copywriting and better images and a nicer logo? Or is there something that, like, if you were to take your own business and break it out of the agency model, let's just say if you were going off on your own right now, or even maybe for your own agency, like something that you've done or that you would recommend that others do to think about building a more compelling brand?
Yeah. Great question. And because it's changed over the last, even just the short time of what a brand is, right? Things like, when brand 10 years ago was just a logo, like you said, it was a logo and a name and maybe a message of what you did.
Right.
But truly, I think where people don't have the branding chops now is understanding one or two things. And we're just, me and my partner Steve were just having this conversation today with a potential client, that logos and like typefaces and color palettes and iconography that's visual identity. That's not brand. Brand people, you're absolutely right. They just like paint with it, and they did for years. It's not like people are wrong, but I think today's version of what brand is super different. It's changed drastically. That brand is not a logo. It has nothing really to do with it. The brand is everything, like why your logo looks the way it does, right? A brand is everything that goes into why we think this typeface fits the messaging you're going to say. The messaging, right? We all say stuff. You live on social. Like if you have any sort of advertising campaign going, you're writing copy, saying stuff about your business. That's not your brand. Brand is knowing what you're going to say and why you're saying it, right? And a lot of work goes into that. So I'd say for a lot of people who are looking to rebrand or get back in the brand, it's a bigger step. It's a step to say like, hey, what do we stand for? Who are we? And once again, these are all like, you have like, if you guys are like, I sell hammers. What are you talking about? You hits a nail, it's $8. Like, what do you mean brand? It's called Joe's Hammers, right? 2022 version of that is like, I get it, Joe and Joe's Hammers. And you totally do that. And you can do that. By the way, that might even be your brand, that we're just nothing but Joe's Hammers. And then we cost $8. You got to know that, but also know that there's probably, Mark's Hammers. And Mark's Hammers donate $2 to the Thumb Recovery Fund of victims of hammer mistakes.
Right.
20 years. Or the hammer handles are handcrafted, made from wood, driftwood that came over from, you know what I mean? There's something there. And the consumer of 2022 really likes that type of stuff. Yeah. And they're gonna go look at the other person. They're going to try something new. They're going to find Mark's Hammers and say, Mark's, I get Mark's Hammers. By the way, if I'm just looking for a hammer for $8 to hammer something, I'm going to come to you. But that world, that sandbox now is millions of people doing their hammer research, and that separates it, because those brands that have a bit of substance to them appeal more to people these days. It's a feeling that they're buying as opposed to just a functional logo. What we do, high, right? So I'd say that's what you got to do. You got to think deeper into what you do to answer your question.
No, and I think it's great feedback and great kind of insight that everybody needs to spend time thinking about what do you want to stand for, and then what story do you want to tell? Like, why are you doing what you're doing, right? What's behind that, and that's going to get you further down the road to better understanding or to better communicating what your brand is. and how you want to be known. I want to fast forward for a moment and look at your specific business.
Yep.
So at Super Collider, over the last year or so, has there been any changes to your offerings, to your services? Have you introduced anything new that you feel has worked well from an offering perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the first part of the business was learning and understanding kind of the market a little more. We knew what we were good at and what we really wanted to do. And then there's another aspect of any type of business, and it's just what people are buying and what people are after out there. So we understood a few things. One, the larger companies, the Nikes and the Lululemons of the world are really brand conscious, right? And they take it very, very seriously. Their brand is really what they sell. And so there's just not a ton of those out there, right? They're very specific, and they're great agencies to work with, or great companies to work with. But we looked at it as we're cruising along, and we're like, a lot of people are asking the same questions that you're posing to me about brand a little bit more. And they're not just complete brand focused. Brand to them, it does have far more layers than just that feeling, right? It's easy for Red Bull to just be like, we need a platform. We'll go take care of this stuff next, and then we'll go take care of this stuff next. And each one has a floor, like in a building dedicated to it, right? That's not real life for a lot of people. So what we started to understand was that that brand idea needs to function more in real life for a lot of people. So we began integrating offerings that we didn't have, or that we didn't come out with for people, in terms of turning your brand into like real life messaging, doing some social for people, right? Helping with that, understanding what their ad messaging needs to look like.
Is that more, sorry, Dan, my apologies for interrupting, I just want to confirm. So is this more implementation work as opposed to before, or is it a completely different, like, just if you could give me a little bit more detail around before versus after in terms of offerings?
Yeah, so it would mostly, this is basically, as a brand agency, what you'll find, and what I think a lot of people find. You say, hey, I need a new brand. They go, awesome. We'll build you a platform, or whatever they call it. We call it a platform. We'll start with this, process. We'll get to the dig deep, and then we'll build all the wild stuff, your values and your personality and all your messaging. And then they'll pack that all up. And they'll just be like, here you go.
Right.
What we found, and even it's sometimes difficult, you can talk to any branding agency of this, is like, there is a level of translation that needs to happen, and you can only do so much. And when you hand that off, it's often diminished or lost or changed because of the layers, right? Sure. And so the businesses recognize that too. They're just like, well, I've got to give it to my marketing team, and they didn't build it, you built it. So how do they interpret it in the best way possible? And what we found is, if you can bridge that gap, it's far more valuable, or it adds such value to companies to say, okay, we're not just going to hand this package to you. We're going to not only build it so it integrates into what you do, but we can assist. You can keep us on as consulting to help you build these assets and deploy them to the world in the way that we all agreed on when we build this. All this work and all this time and money, nailing this. Let's make sure it's nailed on this end. And I think a lot of people can relate to that too, where it's like, the conversation I had with the branding team was like, whoa, and my mind was blown. And then I look at this post or this ad and I go, I feel like it's not saying what we all talked about saying. What happened there? And we find that bridge there is
so you're providing, it sounds like, beyond doing the interviews and the discovery and the research, and then creating the materials, or kind of the plan. You're then going beyond that, and you're also saying we can also now help you to take that plan and implement it, as well as provide ongoing advisory services to ensure that the plan is executed and implemented successfully.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's two versions of that. Some teams have very capable teams. They're like, let's go. Can you just stay on to help advise and consult and or then some, and a lot of people do it too. They go like, this is awesome. Can you do this for us now? Because we'll put go-to-markets together for people to say, this is how you're going to deploy it. This is how this is the best, or our recommendations on how it lives in the world. And a lot of people look back and go, just do this. And for a time we were like, well, yeah, I don't do that currently. Why don't you go talk to these guys? And then we said, well, we can do it. We are good at it.
Hmm.
Let's be a little more vertically integrated. That's what we do.
And how has that changed your hiring model or your team model? Like if you're now providing more services than you were before,
Yep.
are you going out and hiring these people to help you to deliver on these new implementation services? Are you hiring them as full-time employees? Are you just kind of using them as contractors when you need them? How are you kind of bridging that gap to ensure that you have the talent when you need it, but not necessarily taking on too much risk by bringing on a bunch of talent that you may not need right away?
Totally got it. Yeah, it's the good thing about the pandemic and COVID is that that's how everybody's working these days. Is the latter? Nobody's hiring. It's the weirdest thing. It's funny. I looked at another agency where we know here in Vancouver, where we know them well, and we were just on their website. I think we were just looking for ideas or a person or something like that, and we looked at their team, and we knew all of them because they all work with us.
Right.
And basically they built a massive team. You know, it looked like they had 20 people probably in an office, and it felt like fairly traditional, but we're like, there's maybe 4 or 5 people actually who actually would be considered full-time employees there. Now, by the way, it's a bit of a downside. I know that states like California and stuff are dealing with the repercussions of like, you're not quite full-time enough for us to give you the, you know, it's different up here, but that model is what's come out of the pandemic, where we're able to sort of leverage people's ability to want to just be a freelancer for themselves and lend out their expertise as opposed to punching a clock every day. So that's the model thus far. I think I don't think that's indefinite. Like we can't scale it forever. That it's going to come to a point where you sort of have to functionally do it. But for this, you know, since 2019 or 2020, when we decided to pivot in this direction, it's worked very well to be able to do that.
Has your pricing model and pricing strategy shifted in the last couple of years since you started the business? Anything you're doing differently today than you were doing 6 months ago or 18 months ago or 24 months ago?
No. And I think because the pandemic hit us so quickly that we understood that you had to be extremely agile in what pricing was, because it just all went, everyone knows this. It sort of went out the window for some people and really not for a lot of people. In fact, some people went the opposite direction, especially in the digital space, right? It changed. So yeah, not specific changes in pricing model, but definitely we understood that you need to be very malleable as an agency to work with people to get their results for them. And that's really what we're after. And you know, it's funny because it was, you want to put things in a box. It makes it easier to send out a friggin' quote. Like, I'll tell you that. But as like an entrepreneurial couple of people that we are, that Steve and I are, you know, launching our own product to the world, like we understand in a very, very acute level what it's like to put things there. It actually drives us a little bit to understand that the pricing model or your specific needs, where your resources need to go at a specific point in your business, are different for absolutely everybody, from a go-to-market or an emerging brand or an existing brand that's just pivoting or a new product. And the pandemic forced us into understanding that way better, way more than we did. But I feel like it just sort of fits the market a little bit better today.
3 questions before we wrap up, Damon. When you look at your performance as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, is there anything that you do on a regular basis, a habit that you feel leads to your productivity, to higher levels of performance, especially now with a young kid? Yeah, coffee. Okay, so coffee's a go-to. Is there? And listen, there's no rules, there's no right or wrong to this question, but coffee's one for you. Anything else that you do that you just feel like, yeah, this is a real essential part of my being in order for me to operate and to perform?
Yeah, that's a really big can of worms to open there. I love it. I say often, you know, I've never been for lack of enthusiasm right, on anything. And I think that that attribute is something that I've kept, but had to nurture and grow through a strange time that we've been at, and coming out the other side of it when things are hopefully and looking better. Now, I would say that being able to extract enthusiasm out of every project is super, super important. And if you don't have some enthusiasm for it, it's going to be tough for you, especially if things go weird. is going to be really, really challenging for you to feel like you're doing a good job and wanting to do a good job. We all know that in the agency world, you're taking on business that you can take on, right? You're just going to do it. This weird little like red thread that's come through it is the best work and the best points and the best client relationships I have are if I at any point understood that my enthusiasm was waning, I really addressed that. And I said, I asked myself why, and believe me, I'm a true believer that all projects and clients and agents have something you can be passionate about for them. But sometimes you have to take a moment and you've got to really just reassess and look from 30,000 feet down at stuff and reinvigorate yourself. And if you can't do that, it's going to be a challenge for you to get through it and be happy at the end of it.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
Last 6 months or so, any book that you've read or listened to that you just highly recommend?
Yeah.
Could be fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah. So I've reread Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Wow. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Over and again, the long story boring is my dad passed when in the end of 2019. We were very, very close, like best buddies. And so 2021, end of 2020, he passed. 2020 was a bit of a challenge for me personally, right? It was a difficult time dealing with it. It was a big loss for me personally, and but he loved the Lord of the Rings books. It was just his thing. Okay, even at his internment, we like played like the soundtrack like of it as we took his ashes to the afterlife. And I revisited those books in this time, right? They're long books. So that's why it's been like a year of reading these things. But they actually, and you forget about this because we read The Hobbit in like high school. Like, we forgot about it. There's many, many messages and many stories in there, but I would say that it helped me in just business life is really buying into resilience, right? And when I say passion, but like not giving up, right? Mm-hmm. Ever. I'm caring about something and other people a lot, right? There's all of these relationships that exist within this giant tome of Mordor and weird fantasy crap. But I feel that I reconnected so deeply with those messages that that Tolkien was talking about there, which was like friendship, which we lost so many connections during this pandemic. And it was, just the perseverance that happened, and then someone taking on something completely selflessly to go get it done. And I'd say, yeah, that was the most impactful book I've read in a long time. Probably a lot to do with what happened with my pops, but also there was some stuff in there that I re-remembered that it's today I'm like using, and it's inspiring me to be awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That really. It's some great advice, powerful words. I think so often we don't pay attention to those things until something happens that brings our attention back to them, and it's a great reminder for all of us to focus on some of those really key principles. Damon, before wrapping up, I want to make sure that the people can learn more about you, your work, your company. Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, our website is thisissupercollider.com. You can go there and check out a quick portfolio. Obviously, we're on the Instagrams and the Facebooks as well, which is still This Is Super Collider. I think there's like an imposter Super Collider that came out like 6 months ago, but you'll see the difference. You'll see my face on the other one. But yeah, that's where they can go to check me out. And I'm always down for like a chat about brand and about how people perceive stuff these days. So everybody, feel free to reach out just for like a quick Zoom and a coffee. As you can tell, I enjoy talking about myself and what I do.
There we go. Sports, brand, coffee. Reach out to Damon. Damon, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks again. Hey.